Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Joe. I'm a teacher, former examiner, and I tutor at EduKingdom Glen Waverley. And at the end of the last video, I suggested that you look at the 2025 exam topics. Now, depending on when you're looking at these, they may not be available. So here they are. Have a look at them. I'm going to say a couple of things about them, but all of this has to be filtered through what your teacher thinks essay writing looks at. Both of these mean that it's available to us to suggest that the prompt isn't entirely correct. Check with your teacher. Some teachers imagine that there are differences between these terms that actually don't exist, but just keep an eye on what your teacher wants. Either way, it might be worth, as you plan this through, not limiting yourself to points that you want to make, and not even thinking about the points in the order that you think you need to make them. Just allow your mind to wander. And often for me, I find myself thinking of what I think is not entirely accurate about the prompts. It's even worth going through the mental exercise of just asking yourself, even if it seems ridiculous, what the opposite to the prompt might be, just to see if there's any truth to it. Otherwise, we might risk taking wording like this, for example, as an instruction of what it is we're meant to write about, rather than a suggestion that may not always be entirely true. Intellectually, it may feel a bit weird to you to suggest in your final point that actually, no, her poems suggest that it isn't easy to overlook, that they're actually always there. And that's one of the things I like doing in essays, just pushing back a little bit, pointing out that it can be easy in terms of mentally we just don't think about them, but it's actually really difficult to overlook them in the sense that they're all around us. Yeah? This is a little bit easier for us, I think, to work with in terms of thinking about what the opposite is. Is she always celebrating life? What's the opposite of celebration, do you think? What's somewhere back along the continuum? I'm going to quote something that Ross Huggard, who's one of the legendary examiners, said in a meeting a few years ago. Topics exist along a continuum. So before you get to the word celebration, move backwards a little bit. What are the words before it? Is she somewhere in there? It's even worth mentally going through the process of what might strike you as ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying this is an answer. I just want you to get used to at least dismissing the thought, are her poems also a celebration of death? You may think that's ridiculous. Maybe it is ridiculous, but at least you did the mental exercise before you locked yourself into an answer. And then you might even find yourself thinking, hang on, actually, in very specific circumstances, that may be true. By the way, another tip I would give you here is to not disregard the value of planning. To some degree, it's a bit like solving a riddle. It's much quicker, too, to just run through a range of topics, try to plan them out, just get used to the intellectual exercise involved. Also, by the way, it's much quicker for teachers to mark if you just throw them a few plans. And the alternative is, what if you got the plan wrong, but you only found out when you got the essay back 2 weeks after you'd written it, handed it in? You can find out whether the plan is correct within minutes of showing it to a teacher. There are a couple of other tips I can give you if you work with me about how we might go about doing that. Once you've settled on what you think your points are, do you remember actually in the first video I said everyone's going to write about nature? And you can see why it's almost impossible to avoid it here. But you might end up drawing yourself a little table. I've never done this before, so bear with me on my skills, which, as you can see, are pretty shit. And under each point you're making, let's say we're going to make 4, trying to allocate poems to it. Maybe some need 1, some need 2. I don't know. It depends on what your teacher wants. Do they belong together? Do you start to see pairings that work together? You may recall that in the first video I put up, I suggested to you that some poems can operate in pairs and that you actually should think about it in those terms. So, suggestion, take topics like these, map them out, play with them, plan them in whatever order you think works for you, show them to the teacher.